Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, good afternoon. Welcome to the UCD Center for Japanese Studies Special Launch Webinar. 皆さんこんばんは。アイルランド国立大学ダブリン校 UCD 日本研究センターの設立スペシャルウェビナーにようこそ。This event is organized in collaboration with the Embassy of Japan in Ireland, Ireland Japan Association, Experience Japan, UCD Japanese Society, the Irish Embassy in Japan, and UCD Japan. The UCD Center for Japanese Studies is working very closely with various stakeholders in and outside the university, and we are very grateful for the generous support and our partnerships that we have been building over the last 5 years and more. But on this occasion, I'd like to single out one group that deserves our mention. The UCD Japanese Student Society has been very active since its foundation in 2010. In 2018 and 19, they were awarded the Small Society of the Year. There are almost 480 members this year, and during the pandemic, the auditor Simon and his team are putting on a variety of terrific events, 4 to 5 per week, reaching out to students using the special online hub they created to connect with students as they work and study from home. They are true leaders at this difficult time, one of the few student societies to do something like this, and rightly recognized and commended for their initiative by the university. Well done to the team. The UCD Center for Japanese Studies provides support for both UCD and Japanese partners while engaging with our research projects along the 3 themes: re-examining Japan in global context, science, technology, and implementation in Irish and Japanese society, approaches to teaching and learning in the fields of language and culture, business, and diplomacy. So today's special lecture is very much part of our research center's focus. And I'd like to express my heartfelt thanks to Ambassador Kitano for your lecture today. Now I'd like to open today's launch webinar with Ambassador of Ireland in Japan, His Excellency Mr. Paul Kavanagh. Ambassador Kavanagh very kindly sent us this message from Tokyo in advance.
皆様こんばんは。私はアイルランド大使です。ポール・カヴァナです。小立先生、ありがとうございます。I send you warm greetings from Tokyo, from the official residence of the Irish Embassy here. And I'd like to congratulate you, Professor Director Kodate, and all associated with the UCD Center for Japanese Studies upon your formal launch and for the impressive series of events and activities since April 2020 and going back in a previous formation until 2016, which you have organised with widespread support in Ireland. Let me also congratulate Professor Declan Downey for all that he has done over the years to bring Ireland and Japan closer together, and in particular for the distinction that has been conferred on him recently by the government of Japan in recognition of those efforts. I would like to send particular greetings to my distinguished colleague and friend, Japan's Ambassador to Ireland, Mitsuru Kitano, and equally to Ambassador John Neary, late of this parish, and now your own Professor Emeritus, at my own alma mater. Ambassador Kitano's presentation, Why Japan Matters, is much anticipated by all of us. I'm certain that it will be rich in important content. Ambassador Kitano has done wonderful work since taking up his assignment in Ireland over 2 years ago. I'm sure that's not news to any of you. All of us in Team Ireland in Japan wish him continuing success in the years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, I have no wish in this message of greetings to rehearse in detail the many dimensions of the long-standing, close ties which bind Ireland and Japan: cultural, economic, political, and people to people, not least these days in the area of sports. But allow me nonetheless briefly to highlight 3 points. And these illustrate the proposition of this evening's session that Japan is indeed important and important to Ireland. Japan is the number 3 economy in the world. It provides Ireland with its number 1 trade surplus in the Asia-Pacific region and continues to be the number 1 source of FDI investment into Ireland from across the region. It is focused these days under direction from Prime Minister Suga on digitalisation, which provides great opportunities for binding Ireland more closely than ever with Japan. Secondly, Japan and Ireland share fundamental values, a commitment to the rule of law and to the multilateral order in international relations. We are both representative democracies. The people have a power of recall on their government. These are no small things. It used to be the case that they went without saying, but increasingly in the modern world, they need saying, and we need to remember them. And we know that Japan is a factor for stability and peace in its own region and across the world. No surprise that our diplomatic exchanges are intensifying, including in the context of Ireland's current membership of the Security Council of the United Nations. And thirdly, the Government of Ireland is already very focused on Japan. This is evident from our Global Ireland strategy and our Asia-Pacific strategy. But in particular, Ireland is demonstrating the scale of its ambition for its relations with Japan in developing here in Tokyo the new Ireland House. It will be the largest single capital investment ever made overseas by an Irish government in the almost 100 years since independence. That, as Prime Minister Abe has said, is a very clear demonstration of the seriousness of Ireland's commitment. So, ladies and gentlemen, with these thoughts, I again congratulate the Centre upon its formal launch, and I wish you an interesting and fruitful discussion this evening. You are in very good hands. Go seichou. Arigatou gozaimashita. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kavanagh. And I should mention Ambassador Kavanagh is joining us from Tokyo in the audience. Gure mahagat. Domo arigatou gozaimasu. Now I hand over to today's MC, Dr. Declan Downey, who is going to introduce today's speaker and respondent. Declan Sensei is a valued member of our center and has been teaching a long-standing module, Rise of Modern Japan in UCD since the 1990s. And he has recently been awarded the Commendation of Foreign Minister of Japan. We will have a panel discussion at the end of the session. Please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen to submit questions. Now over to you, Declan Sensei.
It is a particularly pleasant honor for me to welcome our guest speaker today. That is His Excellency Ambassador Mitsuru Kitano, and also our respondent, Adjunct Professor John Neary, who is a member of the UCD Center for Japanese Studies. Allow me first and foremost to introduce Professor Neary. He is one of Ireland's most distinguished diplomats who gave over 40 years of service to Ireland since 1974 up until his retirement in 2016. He served as Ireland's ambassador to Japan from 2010 to 2014, and as Ireland's ambassador to the Netherlands from 2014 to 2016. In 2017, he was appointed adjunct professor at UCD School of Social Policy, Social Work and Social Justice, where he works to support the university in developing its links with Japan. He is also a member of the Board of Trustees of the Chester Beatty Library in Dublin, that wonderful treasure house of Asian art and its particularly valuable Japanese collections. And he is also, proudly, a graduate of University College Dublin. And now I have a particular pleasure in introducing to you our guest speaker, His Excellency Ambassador Mitsuru Kitano, who was posted to Dublin in August of 2019. He has over 40 years of distinguished service in bilateral and multilateral diplomacy at both the Ministry of Foreign Affairs headquarters in Tokyo, as well as in the various Japanese embassies and permanent missions abroad, most recently in Vienna. And he has authored and co-edited 4 books in Japanese in such areas as public diplomacy and disarmament and non-proliferation. He has also contributed various articles and research papers to international academic journals. And his most recent article is, quote, Ireland's neutrality policy and Japan's alliance policy. And this is in the Irish Studies in International Affairs, published by the Royal Irish Academy in 2020. So this is a particularly auspicious occasion as we are in that period coming up to the Emperor's birthday next week. And so it is a particular pleasure to welcome the Ambassador to address us today. And I now hand over to Your Excellency the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Declan Downey, for your kind introduction. And I also would like to echo, as my distinguished colleague and Ambassador Paul Kavanagh mentioned, and also Kodate Sensei mentioned, I would like to reiterate and congratulations for your recent commendation conferred by our foreign minister. I thank Kodate Sensei, Dr. Naonori Kodate, to kick off the event. I also thank Professor John Neary for his participation as respondent. I also would like to express my appreciation to my dear friend and colleague, Ambassador Paul Kavanagh, for his kind remarks and insightful comment about our bilateral relationship. And I also welcome his participation from Tokyo today. At the outset, allow me to express my heartfelt congratulations on the establishment of the UCD Japan Research Center in February last year. I feel extremely honored to be given this opportunity to speak today to commemorate the launch of this newly established center. Although it is a pity that we are not able to get together physically to celebrate this important occasion due to COVID-19, I'm delighted to be linked with so many people in Ireland and even beyond who share an interest in Japan. I thank the participants for your presence here. UCD has traditionally had strong ties with Japan. I learned that they date back to the 1950s when UCD started exchange and collaboration with Waseda University, one of the oldest and most esteemed private universities in Japan, in the area of Irish literature. Given that it was 1957 that diplomatic relations between Japan and Ireland began, I have no hesitation to say that UCD is one of the pioneers among many Irish organizations and institutions in engaging with Japan. Therefore, I find it meaningful that the Japan Research Center was established at this university, which has had such a long tradition of engagement with Japan. In this context, I would like to express my deepest respect for the effort by all the dedicated members and staff of this center for their valuable work. I also would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude for the support of the university. Today's topic is, as mentioned, why Japan matters. As Japanese ambassador to Ireland, I have various opportunities to talk about the bilateral relationship between Japan and Ireland, while I sometimes talk to Japanese audiences about why Ireland matters. Today, I'm delighted to address our Irish friends and from the standpoint of why Japan matters. In doing so, I would like to approach the topic from 3 different angles. First, the commonalities between Japan and Ireland. Second, the merit and benefit in engaging with Japan. Third, what Ireland can offer to Japan. Now, let me start. First, let me talk about the commonalities between Japan and Ireland. To begin with, I would like to take up geography. It might be rather unconventional to refer to geography as an element connecting our two countries. I have read various books and papers examining the relationship between Ireland and Japan. Many of them start their description by talking about how the two countries are different and apart, and geography is a typical factor in this respect. The two countries are located at opposite ends of the Eurasian continent, separated by a distance of 10,000 kilometers. While Ireland is mostly flat, Japan is mountainous. Our climates are also different. I admit these things. However, I see important similarities in geography between Ireland and Japan. Both Japan and Ireland are island countries surrounded by sea. Furthermore, Japan and Ireland share the unique characteristic of being located at the margin of a large continent on the one side and facing a big ocean on the other side. You can also add that both countries have in common that it is the United States of America which is located at the end of that big ocean. From my standpoint, this geographical situation is an important determinant in the basic orientation of the two countries. Because of this geographical trait, we could never be a land power like Prussia or Russia. We are basically maritime countries like Venice in medieval Italy, who attached importance to trade and diplomacy. We value being connected to the rest of the world. We like seeing the world safe and stable. We are committed to the principle of openness. Now, let me turn to history as another area of commonality. Here also, conventional wisdom is that the two countries are very much different in history. While Ireland experienced a history of British rule for over 700 years, Japan has not been under foreign rule for most of the time. Ireland is unique in that its experience of the Great Famine in the 19th century left a significant mark on its history. Japan is also singular in its period of national seclusion from the beginning of the 17th century to the middle of the 19th century. I also admit these things. Nevertheless, here also, I find some important commonalities. Both Japan and Ireland have a long history. When Ireland joined the League of Nations in 1923, W.T. Cosgrave, then Taoiseach, called Ireland, I quote, one of the oldest, yet the youngest nation, unquote. As for Japan, while the starting point of Japan as a nation is a subject of academic controversy, few would question that it has a history of thousands of years. Given that we both have a long history, we are both proud of having our own unique national cultures, such as hurling and Gaelic football in Ireland and small wrestling in Japan. Having one's own unique culture and long history allows us to respect each other's history and culture. I also would like to draw your attention to the fact that both countries also have commonalities in economic history. Ireland and Japan both experienced a rapid economic development, the bursting of bubble economy, and recovery from economic distress. Both of us experience these ups and downs within a rather limited time span. Through these experiences, both of us have learned some common lessons, such as economic policy matters, we have to adapt to the changing external environment. It is important to invest for the future. Human resources are essential. These are the things we commonly learned. Being scarce in natural resources, we both believe in the importance of self-reliance. Another area I would like to touch upon in my itemization of commonality is basic value. It is one of the things which Ambassador Kavanagh mentioned in his comment. I know this is another area people have acknowledged difference between Ireland and Japan. Christianity is an important part of Irish life, while the strong influence of Buddhism is observed in Japan's culture. I have no objection to this point. However, if we think of such basic values as freedom, democracy, respect for human rights, and the rule of law, we are very much akin to each other. Both Ireland and Japan are strongly committed to these basic values. Under the current international situation, sharing these values is becoming more and more precious. Allow me to quote what the Taoiseach Micheál Martin said last month at the Institute of International and European Affairs, IIEA. He said, quote, "The need for strong rule-based structure to guide how countries behave is being challenged on many fronts, and core values, including the fundamentals of democracy, are under attack in many places," unquote. One of the indicators often cited for evaluating the world situation for democracy and freedom is the annual report of international NGO Freedom House. Its most recent report in March last year observed a worldwide retreat of freedom and democracy for the 14th consecutive year. The report asserts that the principle of liberal democracy in Europe, historically the best performing region in the world, have been under serious pressure in recent years. The situation is bleaker in Asia. The same report pointed out that political rights and civil liberties declined overall in Asia, and authoritarian rulers showed their disdain for democratic values. Unfortunately, we can see such basic values as freedom, democracy, respect for human rights, and the rule of law are becoming more and more of a scarcity in the world. Against this background, I am of the view that the shared commitment to these values by Ireland and Japan is of great importance. As a matter of fact, it provides the basis of a common readiness for open economies, free trade, multilateralism, and realization of peace. From my standpoint, it is quite natural that our two countries share the same basic stance on these issues, given the common geographical characteristic I mentioned earlier. Some may think that this issue of basic values is an issue of world politics and wonder how it would concern the activities of business or individual. My sense is that whether you share these basic values with certain countries matters a lot. If you would like to forge a long-term stable relationship with those countries, without sharing these values, you might run the risk of being ambushed or surprised by an event unthinkable in your own value system. Therefore, I am of the view that sharing these values can be a good basis for having a long-term stable relationship and working together. Up until now, I have been itemizing several commonalities between the two countries. You can find several other countries with whom Ireland has commonalities. Then why does Japan matter? From here, I would like to talk about the merit and benefit of engaging with Japan. Japan is located in the dynamic Asia-Pacific region. As is often pointed out, one of the important trends in recent international relations is a rising prominence of the Asia-Pacific region in the world. In 1980, the share of the Asia-Pacific region's GDP globally at current prices was approximately 20%. According to the IMF, this is set to double to over 40% by 2025. Under the economic distress caused by COVID-19, the Asia-Pacific is a region that is recovering the most rapidly. In world politics, more and more attention is being paid to the tensions between the US and China. The Economist magazine mentioned US-China tensions as the fourth ranking issue among 10 trends to watch in 2021. The Eurasia group also listed the same issue as the fourth highest among top 10 risks for 2021. Hotspots of their rivalry is in East Asia. The government of Ireland also recognizes the importance of this region. In the pursuit to realize global Ireland, the Irish government formulated a strategy focusing on this region in January last year. It is a document entitled Global Ireland, Delivering in the Asia-Pacific region to 2025. I presume that the acknowledgement of the importance of this region led the Irish government to formulate this regional strategy. In this Asia-Pacific region, Japan occupies a considerable weight. Japan is the second biggest economy in the Asia-Pacific region, next to China. The share of Japan's GDP in the Asia-Pacific region as a whole is estimated to be around 16% as of 2020. Japan is also home of such global corporations as Toyota, Honda, Nissan, Canon, and Sony. Looking at the foreign direct investment FDI flow to Ireland from Asia-Pacific region, Japan is the biggest source of accumulated investment as of 2019. While economic size is important, values also matter. As I mentioned earlier, shared value can be a good basis for having a long-term stable relationship and working together. With this, Japan can be an ideal gateway if you plan to make an outreach to the dynamic Asia-Pacific region. Another merit and benefit to engaging with Japan is related to challenges we commonly confront. The global community is facing various challenges: the pandemic, global warming, terrorism, and adaptation to new technology, to name a few. Among them, one serious challenge for many countries, particularly among advanced countries, is the issue of an aging society. In this context, Japan can be considered a frontrunner in facing this challenge. Japan is one of the most aged society in the world, with a median age of 48 years old, while the equivalent in Ireland is 38. The median age is the age we are given when we divide the population into two groups of the same size, namely half the people younger than a certain age and a half older. It is a single index that summarizes the age distribution of a population. As is well known, an aging population presents various difficult tasks for the society. How to finance the skyrocketing cost of pension and medical care for the aged population. How to come up with much needed human resources who can provide care services to aged people. How to make use of the vitality of the retired population. The reason why I mentioned Japan as a frontrunner to face the challenges is that Japan is tackling these issues ahead of other countries. In 1990, 30 years ago, Japan's median age was 37, almost the same as that of Ireland now. At that time, Ireland's median age was even younger, and it was only 28. Therefore, it might be the case that Ireland will experience the same kind of evolution of the society following in the footsteps of Japan, although the speed and trajectory of such change is difficult to predict at this stage. I will not claim we are successful yet in dealing with these challenges. We have had to discover things by various trials and errors. However, it is certain that Japan can provide lessons learned from its own experience as a frontrunner to face the challenges, which can be useful for Ireland. In addition to what I have talked about, I have another reason to make a pitch for Japan. That is what Ireland can offer to Japan. In thinking about the comparison between Japan and Ireland, I feel Ireland has a lot to offer to Japan. One thing is entrepreneurial spirit. I know that Irish people are inclined to having a frontier spirit and disposed to start new things. Ireland is a country with tens of millions of people of Irish descent around the world. Those who left the country as diaspora were those who had a vigorous frontier spirit to pave a new way forward, while many of them were obliged to choose that option. Now, Ireland is one of the countries most active in startups, supported by such a frontier spirit. It is one of the sources of dynamism of Irish economy. Now that the world is changing rapidly, both economically and socially, creating new business is becoming more and more important. While Japan's economy is large in size, the Irish economy is vibrant and dynamic. My view is that this vigorous entrepreneurial spirit is one of the things Japan badly needs. In Japan, we have JETRO, a semi-governmental organization to support business. One of JETRO's priority areas is to show up innovation startups. I'm convinced that entrepreneurial spirit is one of the things Ireland can offer to Japan. The other thing Ireland can offer to Japan is open-mindedness to diversity. Ireland is a country which has forbearance toward diversity. In my humble understanding, this open-mindedness to diversity is also related to the experience of their compatriots who have emigrated to other countries, particularly in the 19th century during the time of the Great Famine. Their exposure to different social environment and culture is no doubt one of the background of this openness. My sense is that, in this respect, much has changed in Irish society in the past decades. Irish society has moved to embrace differences and diversity, leaving behind an era when a certain way of thinking dominated the people's way of life. It is illustrative to note that in Ireland, the process to embrace diversity has overlapped the process of its economy gaining dynamism. In order to advance innovation or creativity, open-mindedness to embracing difference is important. In my view, this is another thing Ireland can offer to Japan. I also would like to add the policy initiative of Japan's new Prime Minister, Suga Yoshihide. He advanced the idea to promote two things. One is digital transformation, and the other is realization of a green society. I'm of the view that Ireland has much to offer to Japan in these two areas. As has been discussed, commonalities between our two countries, merits and benefits in engaging with Japan, as well as things Ireland can offer to Japan. I hope now you understand why I claim Japan matters. The government of Ireland also attaches importance to enhancing relations with Japan. The Ireland House Tokyo project, as mentioned by Ambassador Paul Cavanagh, to upgrade the Irish embassy in Japan together with local offices of other governmental agencies is underway. This project represents the biggest capital investment overseas since the beginning of Irish diplomacy about 100 years ago. This testifies to the significance that the Irish government attaches to its relation with Japan. Now, the whole world has been facing the tremendous challenge of COVID-19 for almost a year. Our activities are still severely constrained by this pandemic. However, for me, even COVID-19 indicates the possibility of collaboration between our two countries. In June last year in Dáil Éireann, Mr. Simon Coveney, then Tánaiste and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade, referred to countries Ireland had excellent cooperation with to secure essential medical equipment. Japan was one of the countries Mr. Coveney specifically mentioned. I'm delighted that Japan had something to offer to Ireland at this time of crisis. Further, cyberspace has become an important tool of communication as we are linked online today. I presume it will continue to be so even after humanity overcomes this pandemic. Then, the geographical distance of 10,000 kilometers between our two countries will be of less importance. It is not difficult to be connected to Japan, as we have some participants all the way from Japan right now. I suppose there are many areas our two countries can collaborate with each other. Preparing for aged society, supporting startups, realizing a digitalized society, moving toward a green society, and promoting common basic values, to name a few. Looking back at the history of relationship between our two countries, in December 2013, a joint declaration by Mr. Abe Shinzo, then Prime Minister of Japan, and Mr. Enda Kenny, then Taoiseach of Ireland, was issued to launch the partnership between Japan and Ireland. It is one of my priorities that this document, formulated 7 years ago, will be updated with a view to mapping out the future orientation of a partnership for the years to come. This is a forward-looking exercise that I would like to attach importance to this year. I stand ready to work hard to enhance the bonds between our two countries. I would be delighted if today's talk helps you to understand the importance of the relationship between Japan and Ireland. I stop here and thank you very much for your attention.
どうもありがとうございました、北野大使。Thank you so much for your most engaging and thought-provoking presentation. You have given us so much to think about in your tour de force, and I'm sure there will be quite a few questions and observations in our discussion. Also, I might take this opportunity to express to you and to Ambassador Kavanagh, respectively, my personal gratitude for your kind felicitations on the recent honors that I've received from the Japanese government. So now, ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I should like to call on Professor John Neary to give the formal response to Ambassador Kitano's splendid presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Downey, for your kind introduction, and allow me also to join Ambassador Kavanagh and Ambassador Kitano in congratulating you on the award you have received for your efforts over many years to promote closer relations between Ireland and Japan. So thank you very much, Ambassador Kitano, for your very interesting and wide-ranging lecture. And thank you also for the great support that you and your colleagues at the Embassy, both past and present, have given to Japanese studies in UCD, and more widely to academic exchanges between Ireland and Japan. It is indeed a good question to ask why a country as far away from Ireland as Japan should be important to us. The ambassador spoke about the commonalities between us in terms of geography and history and shared interests, and all of this is very true. But despite these commonalities, we cannot avoid the fact that Ireland and Japan are very different in terms of size and population, and most importantly, they are physically very far apart. So on the face of it, we are somewhat unlikely partners. Of course, technology is constantly reducing the distance between our two countries. It takes much less time to fly from Dublin to Tokyo now than it did, say, when we first established diplomatic relations in 1957. And advances in communications technologies, in particular the advent of the internet and social media, have made it much easier to know more about each other than ever before. But still, it is worth asking why Japan matters to Ireland. There are three areas where I would like to focus my remarks. The first is the direct benefits that we gain from our cooperation with Japan. The second is the contribution that Japan makes to international peace and security, which also benefits us here in Ireland. And the third is Japan's culture, which is so rich and diverse. When we look at the benefits of our relationship with Japan, the most obvious area is trade. We have heard a lot in recent years in the context of Brexit about the gravity model of international trade, which emphasizes the importance of markets which are geographically close. But markets outside Europe are increasingly important for Ireland, and especially a large market such as Japan, which is the third largest country economy in the world. Ambassador Kitano referred to the fact that Japan is the largest source of foreign direct investment into Ireland from Asia, and Ambassador Kavanagh mentioned this also. And Japan is also Ireland's 10th largest trading partner in the world. And our trade with Japan should increase even further as a result of the EU-Japan Economic Partnership Agreement, which entered into force in 2019. So economically, Japan matters to Ireland a great deal. Building on the existing economic cooperation should be a priority for Ireland and Japan in the coming years. The ambassador referred to the Programme for Innovation and Growth, which was signed by Taoiseach Enda Kenny and Prime Minister Abe Shinzo in December 2013 in Tokyo. I agree with him that this programme offers a very good basis for developing cooperation between our two countries in areas of mutual interest. And I very much welcome his determination to update this programme in the present year. As Ambassador Kitano said, there are many areas where Ireland and Japan can fruitfully collaborate with each other. He mentioned the challenge of aging, which is already an issue for Japan and which will undoubtedly be an issue for Ireland in the future as well. There is no doubt that we can learn a lot from Japan's experience in this area and from the innovative solutions they are developing. And speaking of innovation, Japan's leadership in investing in research and development more generally is an example that we in Ireland could do more to emulate. The second area I would mention is international security. The ambassador referred to the growing economic importance of the Asia region. And this means that the security of this region is of great importance for the entire world, including Ireland. As our world becomes increasingly interconnected and interdependent, any instability in one region can have a negative impact on others. And so, despite our distance from Asia, we cannot ignore what is happening there. Japan plays a vital role in preserving peace and security in the Asia region, in partnership with other countries. And it is in our interest here in Ireland that it continues to play this role effectively. But Japan's contribution to international peace and security goes beyond its own region. The ambassador mentioned some of the challenges facing the global community, where a common response is essential. Issues such as climate change, loss of biodiversity, halting the spread of weapons of mass destruction, protecting human rights, and ensuring the maintenance of a rules-based international order. Over the last 75 years, the multilateral system has evolved to cope with these and other major challenges. But that system is currently under threat. Ambassador Kitano mentioned the Freedom House report last year, which observed a retreat from freedom and democracy for the 14th consecutive year. We have seen a sharp rise in populism and authoritarianism in recent years, and a weakening commitment to solving international issues through cooperation. So countries like Ireland and Japan, which share the same values and approaches to resolving global problems, as both Ambassador Kavanagh and Ambassador Kitano said, we need to work together more than ever to reinforce the message that the multilateral system is our best and ultimately our only hope of addressing these global challenges peacefully and successfully. Japan has been a strong supporter of the United Nations and an active supporter in many areas of activity. Japan is the second largest contributor to the regular budget of the UN and the third largest contributor to its peacekeeping budget. We in Ireland also attach great importance to the United Nations as a forum for dealing with international issues. And we have just started a 2-year term on the UN Security Council, where we hope to make a significant contribution to the UN's work. So it's very important for us that Japan continues to be a strong supporter of the UN and the multilateral system more generally. The third area I would mention where I believe Japan matters is culture. Japan has a unique culture which has evolved over thousands of years. It is one of the great cultures of the world. We in Ireland are rightly proud of our own culture, and we consider it an essential part of who we are. Irish and Japanese cultures are very different, but we both value culture for similar reasons. It's a great way of expressing ourselves, of communicating our thoughts and feelings, and of celebrating our sense of community. In international relations too, a variety of cultures enriches us all. Cultural exchange helps us to understand each other better and to find new and deeper ways of connecting with each other. We should never underestimate the power of culture to be a bridge between peoples and a common space where everyone can meet. In the early 1990s, Japan created a special trust fund within UNESCO to assist developing countries to preserve their cultural heritage. Japan has also given assistance bilaterally to developing countries to restore cultural monuments and to promote their traditional arts and crafts. So Japan clearly understands the importance attached to culture. And this is something that we in Ireland should also value and appreciate. I hope that this new Centre for Japanese Studies here in UCD will encourage students to take an interest in Japan, to explore all the connections between our two countries, be they political, economic, or cultural, and to think about the possibilities for developing those links further. And if they do, then I have no doubt they will conclude, as I do, that Japan does indeed matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, John, for your splendid response to Ambassador Kitano. And also, again, thank you for your personal felicitations as well. And likewise, I join with you and with Nao Sensei in thanking both Ambassador Kitano and Ambassador Kavanagh for their wonderful support for our Center for Japanese Studies at UCD. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we move towards the open forum for discussion. And at this point, we have a number of questions that have been coming through here. There certainly is a lot of activity in this regard. And I'm just going to select a few here. A number of them are on a similar theme. So I suppose the first pressing one is one that perhaps both Ambassador Kitano and Professor Neri could address here. And it's regarding the Japanese companies in Ireland and how they are meeting the challenges of Brexit. And would Brexit impact upon Japanese companies when considering Ireland as a base for operations in Europe? So this is a question that will exercise minds. So, Ambassador Kitano, would you like to comment on the impact of Brexit on Japanese companies and what supports can be given to them, and whether they would bear this in mind when considering Ireland as a base for operations in Europe?
Yes, and thank you very much. And it is a great question and an important point. And short answer is it varies from one sector to the other. And Japanese business here, and there are several sectors which are very much important. And one is pharmaceutical, and the other is airplane leasing, and the third is financial. And so, and maybe the answer, the response to Brexit would very much vary and from one sector to the other. For example, an airplane leasing, and this business is very much a global business. And so it is not a business which transport goods from one place to the other. So, and these are the area which is less affected. And pharmaceutical, and it also depends upon the business model they are having, and if their production and chain and supply chain involves UK, and they have to address that. But then if their supply chain is Eurozone and EU zone, and it would not be affected too much. But then we have get in touch with various Japanese related business, and some has said that they have prepared well, so they can cope with it and quite well. And some say that they are not so much affected. But allow me to add that general trend which I hear is that in overall, not related to Japanese, but some of the base in UK, and there is a tendency to move to other places. And one is moving to the continental side, and the other is moving to Ireland. And so Ireland can benefit from this move, but then some say that moving to European continent, and they have, and it would provide an better chance to have a better access and for and when it comes to, and it is a hub for transporting, and so and the continent would provide. So in order to an Ireland to capitalize this chance, it would be good that Ireland would present some strong edge, and which would overcome and this downside. So, and that is my assessment for the moment.
Thank you, Ambassador Kitano. John, would you like to comment on that as well?
Well, I think the ambassador is right that Brexit may present opportunities for Ireland to present itself as a more attractive location for investment for Japanese companies looking at a European base. And certainly if they're looking for a base within the European Union and an English-speaking country, then Ireland is an obvious one to consider. But the reality is that investment decisions are made on the basis of a variety of different indicators and reasons, and location is only one of them. So we shouldn't assume that there will be an automatic rerouting of investment from Britain into Ireland as a result of Brexit. And of course, we shouldn't look at Brexit as an opportunity for us to take investment from there. We should focus very much on our own attractions, which I know the IDA Ireland do in terms of emphasizing our workforce, our education system, the attractions of living and working in Ireland, and also our expertise in certain sectors like aircraft leasing, which Ambassador Kitano mentioned. So I think there may be opportunities here, but Brexit will not be enough. And I think we need to continue to work to make Ireland an attractive location for foreign direct investment.
Thank you very much. Now we have another question more on the broader political geostrategic nature. What is the future of relations between Ireland and Japan in the context of the United States retraction or withdrawal from global leadership? So with the United States dealing with its own foreign policy objectives at the moment, and the apparent, shall we say, withdrawal from the world stage, but I'm not so sure if it is an actual withdrawal. I think under the new administration of President Biden, they're going to re-engage again. But I just formulating the question here from a contributor, how do you see the Irish-Japanese relationship developing in the context of global leadership, issues of global leadership, and a point that was raised in your speech, Ambassador, about the increase of authoritarianism in the world as well, and the threat to democracy and the rule of law?
Can I start?
Yes, please, Ambassador.
Yes, and thank you very much. And it is very much an important issue, and particularly at hand. And yes, and Declan, I suppose, and as you pointed out, and what would be the stance of a new U.S. administration, and that is very much important. And one of the things which a new President Joe Biden did was that he came to the State Department and delivered a speech. And his message is very much clear. And U.S. is back. U.S. is back to diplomacy. And so, and he showed his willingness to play a role in world stage. And so, Declan, as you rightly pointed out, and I suppose U.S. would be try to engage with the world. And so I very much hope, and as the internal setting would not be as pessimistic as an assumption of the question, but still, and I also admit that the world situation and is faced with various challenges. This is one of the points I also mentioned in my presentation. So, and still, and there is a need that Japan and Ireland and US and work together, and or I should also add an EU and in this framework. And so an important thing is how to show up and uplift the various and basic values, and which I also mentioned in my presentations. And so I suppose Ireland's I very much thank John to touching upon the question of international security, and in a second point and in his remarks. And Ireland has a big role to play, and this year, next year, and Ireland will, and Ireland is a member of Security Council, and even after that, and Ireland's commitment in this area is very much clear, and so we would work together and in these issues. And also, one of the, if I talk about the region which would be important, it would be a region which would be called Indo-Pacific. And the more and more attention is paid to this region and Indo-Pacific, and so how to engage in this region. And EU has been discussing this, and Ireland has a regional strategy, and Ireland's strategy is an Asia-Pacific. So, and it is not identical, but still, and Ireland has its own perspective on it. So, and we have a lot to work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. John, would you like to come in there?
Thank you very much. Well, I agree with you and with Ambassador Kitano that all the signs are that the new American administration is proposing to re-engage internationally and to take up America's global leadership position. But I think the lesson of the last 4 years is that we can no longer take for granted that the United States will adopt this leadership position internationally and will be at the heart of the multilateral system for resolving global issues. And so it means that there is now, I think, a greater responsibility on countries like Ireland and Japan, which are committed to the multilateral system, to work more closely together to ensure that it remains the way in which global problems are dealt with. And I touched on this in my remarks. So I think this is at the heart of our election to the Security Council of the United Nations, and we have an opportunity now for 2 years to demonstrate our commitment to the multilateral system. But I think the message for all countries of recent events is that we all have to commit to using the multilateral system and to making sure that it works effectively. And that means reforming it as well as using it and making it fit for purpose in the 21st century. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, John. Now, drawing on from collaboration and working together on multilateral issues, we have another question here regarding the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccines. And do you envisage possibilities for Japan and Ireland to cooperate in regards to raising funds or making available vaccinations to poorer countries in the world? So that brings us into the area of international cooperation in developing countries, etc. So, Ambassador Kitano, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, and thank you very much. And this is a very important issue. And I suppose now in Ireland, and how to roll out and vaccines is a very much important issue. And so does in Japan. And in Japan, and the process of starting vaccination and would be starting up shortly. And so, and vaccination has various aspects. And one is that how to ensure your population and to be covered, and in what order, in what priorities, and how to ensure that and to the population, and at the same time, and how to address and international and dimension is also important, and this pandemic is a typical and global issue, and it is not a one country issue, and so it is very much important each country do their own work, but at the same time to consolidate solidarity, and particularly for those countries who are in need, and that is very much important. And my understanding is that both Ireland, Japan, and in this area, and we are very much committed to the active use of multilateral system. And I very much agree with John and highlighting the importance of multilateral system. This is where multilateral system should operate. So, and I suppose we are the country who would support, and we would work together, and this multilateral system, and to support those countries in need. And so, this is the common objectives, and on that, I suppose we are on the same page. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. John, do you have any comments to make?
Yes, well, this is a very good question, because we have heard the Director General of the World Health Organization expressing concern recently about the possibility that developing countries will be left behind and will not get access to vaccines quickly enough. And I've no doubt that this is an issue that will be very much preoccupying the Department of Foreign Affairs in its development aid program, and that we will be looking to see where we can use Irish aid to assist developing countries to deal with the pandemic, and in particular to ensure that they get an adequate supply of vaccines. And I think that this may well be an area where there is possibility for collaboration with Japan, because Japan, like Ireland, has a very extensive and a very active program of assistance to developing countries. So as well as the multilateral area, which Ambassador Kitano mentioned, I think bilaterally, there may well be a lot that we can do together to help ensure that developing countries are helped to deal with this pandemic as well as the developed world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. We have so many questions here, and many of them on the area as well of acceptance of diversity in Japan, and what steps are being taken at the moment in Japan with regard to that, and in what way could Ireland assist Japan in that aspect. And linked to that, then we have another question as to what are the secrets behind the vitality and activity of the silver generation in Japan. So I think that's a lovely one there. And it's, in fact, that question has come from one of our audience who's tuned in from Hungary. So just shows you the level of wide international interest there is this morning in our webinar here. So Ambassador Kitano, would you like to comment on that as well, the aspect of diversity in Japan and encouraging it, and where you see Ireland might be able to assist? And John, you might think about that as well and come in on that discussion too. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and the reason why I mentioned that this is something Ireland can offer, and because I see some level of difference and how the matter is perceived here in Ireland and in Japan, and it is very much related to how people feel and how people acknowledge. And so, and my sense is that in Ireland, as I mentioned in my presentation, and have spent several decades and generations and to transform and to evolve and in that direction. So it is not something which would happen overnight. And but I suppose the more we hear a lot of the stories, the more we hear various experiences, and the more we understand there are various ways of looking at each issues. And I know that in Ireland some of the issues has been very much delicate in the past. And so it is an issue which takes time, and it is not an easy issue. It is sometimes very much delicate issue, and which very much touches upon people's sensitivity. And so my very much important thing which I would like to mention is that it can start from an understanding various perspectives. So your experience of transformation would be very much interesting for Japanese audiences to grasp, and given that you have evolved in this respect. And so that is how I'm feeling at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. John, would you like to come in there?
Well, I agree entirely with Ambassador Kitano. This is an area where it is difficult to necessarily relate from one country to another. As he said in his opening lecture, we have had the benefit of our emigration, our history of emigration over 2 centuries, which has given us very close contacts with many countries around the world. And I think that has, as he said, contributed to our openness to other cultures and other peoples and other ways of doing things. And of course, most of the inward migration into Ireland over the last 20 years or so has happened at a time when our economy was growing very strongly, and there was a need for more people to enter our workforce. So there was a very ready welcome for people coming into Ireland because they were able to help us in our economic development. And that was certainly a strong factor, I think, in the positive experience that we have had of inward migration. I think my experience of Japan is that it's a country that is changing all the time. And even since I have started going to Japan, I notice there are far more foreign visitors. There are far more foreign companies working in Japan and locating in Japan. So I think this is something which Japan will cope with very well, as it does with so many other challenges. As for the silver generation, as somebody who has recently joined the ranks of this generation, I must say I think it's wonderful how people in Japan are not concerned about age and are concerned solely with their own interests and their own abilities to contribute to whatever area they are dealing with. And I think that's something we can take encouragement from and take example from, because nobody should be limited by their age in terms of the work they do or the interests they become involved in. And I hope that we will follow the example of Japan and keep active, for as long as we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have to watch the clock here because time is moving on, and we have so many questions and comments, etc. But I'll just mention one here. It's by way of an observation. Wonderful addresses by Ambassadors Paul Kavanagh and Ambassador Mitsuru Kitano, and by Professor John Neary, and especially regarding the topics of Irish and Japanese shared heritage and where they have the potential to meet challenges together in the future. It is a fine example of fair exchange and no robbery. Now, I think that's a marvelous comment on the proceedings and the expositions we've heard today. And I think on that high note, we should conclude this part of the forum discussion now. But rest assured, everyone, that your questions are being collated and we will pass them on to Ambassador Kitano later on. There are quite a number there, and some of them would be more of a technical nature. I think that perhaps the trade office in the embassy could deal with more directly. So on this point, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to express our sincere gratitude, appreciation, and our congratulations to Ambassador Kitano for his wonderful tour de force, and to Professor John Neary for his marvelous response, and to both of them for their engagement with the questions and for their observations and comments. We are indeed indebted to both of these very fine diplomats and scholars for sharing their views with us today. So on your behalf, I should like to thank them, and now I shall hand over to now Sensei, as I think he's going to formally conclude the proceedings. So thank you very, very much indeed. And I suppose in this point, yeah, we can move.
Thank you so much, Declan Sensei. And thank you very much, Kitano Taishi and Neary Taishi. And great interactions and so many questions. And thank you so much for also posting all these questions. We probably need another session. I'd like to thank all the co-organizers and everyone who joined us today. Among many events we have been hosting, we had the largest audience. And thank you again to all the contributors, particularly Kitano Mitsuru Taishi. どうもありがとうございました。We now have our YouTube channel, and some of last year's UCD Japan Fair's webinars are also available. Next week, we will have the second special webinar, Why Women Leaders Fostering Tomorrow's Leaders in Japan, with Professor Mariko Bando, Chancellor of Showa Women's University, and Professor Geraldine Doyle from UCD Michael Murphy Graduate School of Business, Deputy Director of our Center, Associate Professor Emma Sokyo in the School of Physics. It will be a Ladies' Day next Tuesday. So there's still time, so please register on Eventbrite and join us then. Stay safe wherever you are. Go to Minmagaf, and どうもありがとうございました. Have a lovely weekend.